Without further ado, let's bring Sam Phillips back to the stage to bring up our new panel. Come on, let's bring them all up. Here we go. Jan, Helen and Dibashi.
Hi again, I'm back. I feel I should have treated this a bit more like the Oscars and done a whole outfit change, but anyway, you get me wearing the same trousers. So, hello, can I have just a show of hands? Who was here for the first session? Okay, the vast majority, that's great. So just a tiny recap, I'm CMO of Omnicom Media Group in the UK, and I also look after the broader inclusion and diversity agenda there. I won't go into the detail because most of you have heard it before. This is the second panel of the day around this agenda. What we decided to do this year at the Festival of Media was to separate the panels out, to make the first one more about the HR people recruitment side of it, getting the right people in our businesses, and to make this one more about the commercial side of it, because there is an absolute truth that is proven time and time again now, incontrovertibly, that greater diversity leads to greater business success. So that gives rise to all sorts of questions about, well, if that's true, then why is there still so much talk and not as much action potentially as we would all like, and what can we all do individually and corporately to drive that further? So that's enough preamble from me. I want to introduce you to our wonderful panel. First of all, Jan Gooding, her second year on the panel. Jan Gooding probably needs no introduction to many of you. She was previously running the marketing function at Aviva, and now she is their first ever Global Inclusion Director. So welcome back, Jan, and thank you very much. Next we have Helen McGuire, who is from Hopscotch, which is a company in Dubai, particularly focusing on how to get women back in the workplace. It's really changed the game over there, so we're bringing in a Middle Eastern angle. And finally, we have Dibashi Pandit. Dibashi is heading up the multicultural function at Sky. He previously, full disclosure, used to work at Omnicom Media Group, who was one of the first recruits we had in OMG ETHNIC, so we go back a long way. So thank you very much for that. I've done the top line. What I'd like you all to do now is just to give a little bit of intro to yourselves so that people can get a bit of a flavour for you, and then we'll go into some questions. Jan, do you want to?
Well, hello everybody, and thank you for staying for this session. I suppose my own change of role is me not talking about it and doing a bit more about it. So I was indeed the Group Brand Director when I came last year, and I'm also the chair of the LGBT charity Stonewall in the UK. So I was doing a little bit more than the day job. I'm the first ever Global Inclusion Director to be appointed at Aviva, and it is a very, very big statement for us to do that. Normally, diversity and inclusion was tucked underneath somebody called the Talent Director, and the deal breakers for me before I would accept the role were, first of all, that I had to report into a board member, and that it had to be one of the chief executives of a big business unit. So I report into Andy Briggs, who's the chief executive of our UK insurance business, which accounts for pretty much 70% of the revenue. So I've got a big silverback in the board. And I'm also on the senior team of our people function, reporting into Sarah Morris. And that's critical because I wanted to state not only was this a meaningful business role for me and for Aviva, but that actually I was not going to create a huge, great team. I want all of the activation that comes out of the strategic thinking that I hope to offer to be embedded from the get-go in the natural processes and ways we work at Aviva.
Great. Helen.
My name's Helen McGuire. Firstly, I'd like to thank Jeremy and Leahs for having me here today. As Sam rightly said, I'm based in Dubai. My business, Hopscotch.ae, is a platform that supports women. We help women to find flexible work, and we train them, and we partner with huge multinationals like GE, MasterCard, Visa, Pepsi, Nestle, you name it, to help that happen. We are part of a wider group, so some of you in the room might work with MCG Group, who's they're a recruitment group that are global. And the reason Hopscotch was set up by myself is purely a reason of sheer frustration at the situation in the Middle East, particularly, although clearly it's a global issue as well, of women not being in senior positions in the workplace. I've got 2 kids myself. I went on maternity leave, and I was lucky enough to be able to go back for 4 days a week into my advertising role. I was formerly at BBDO in Dubai, but many of my friends and lots of women I met also having babies were not as lucky. And the situation in the UAE specifically is particularly bad. We have probably the most educated female workforce in the world because everybody who moves there has to have a degree. But the employment rate of women there is half of the global average. So clearly there's a big job to do, and I just thought, why can't I be the one to do it? So that's why Hopscotch was set up.
Fantastic. Debashi.
Thank you, Sam, for the introduction. So a bit of background about me. So I've worked at different creative agencies across markets. So Ogilvy and Mather, I started my career there. McCann Erickson, Lowe, working across India, Singapore, Dubai. And I moved to the UK about 15 years back. So in the UK, I worked at Sony Pictures, where I was heading its global paid television market for international audiences. And along with that, I also spent about 6 years at Omnicom Media Group as the first director of OMG ETHNIC, where my remit was to introduce clients across the wider Omnicom Media Group on a missed opportunity, and the missed opportunity being from a commercial angle, which is ethnic audiences that live in the UK. Because clearly, we know that they tend to lead dual media lifestyles, i.e. they're watching their best of content that originates from their country of origin, because that's how they can associate themselves with their own culture, identity, likes. And at the same time, they're also consuming the best of their country of residence content, which in UK's particular case would be football, X Factor, and the works. So after 6 years at Omnicom Media Group, where I realized that yes, we could do more with the message being spread across, because in all fairness, I don't think in the whole of UK there is a position of director multicultural or head of multicultural. So I always had to create a job for myself. So I ended up having a conversation with John Lister, Jamie West, and Rachel Bristow at Sky Media, made a business case opportunity for them with regards to where we think Sky Media can. And my role is to leverage Sky's assets when it comes to ad smart targeting, as well as our linear TV representation of ethnic channels, and indulge in the dual media behavior of audiences that leads brands being more relevant and engaging to the ethnic groups. So that's me.
Great, thank you. So, starting with you, Jan, what, as you see it, is the dividend that's to be derived from having an inclusion strategy that doesn't stop at a company's employee base, which we talked about earlier, but which also translates through to a company's or a brand's outputs?
I love the financial language, Sam.
Well,
That's
evidence-based.
how I have to speak at Aviva. I think anyone looking at the financial services industry, and I'm talking globally, would observe that we have had a massive cultural problem for decades. How many times are we going to, as an industry, bring the world to its knees with some sort of financial crisis or huge scandal? And always the argument came, we must be more customer-centric. We've got too remote from the customer. The board were asleep at the wheel. There are too many financial, actuarial people running the insurance company. And so the argument for us, quite simply, because frankly, any of you in the room who don't know the macro case, which is better profit, productivity, more profit, that's been issued again and again from McKinsey to the FT to the Economist, you know, for heaven's sake, I think we all know that macro case. We had to make one that was specific to Aviva. And for me, it's very simply the observation I made that our customer base has not grown for the entire 8 years at which I was Aviva. And if we want to grow as a business and we want to grow our customer base, we needed to get closer to them, to be more intuitive. And in an age where we also want to be a big digital insurer, where we have to be intuitive, we all talk about agile experimentation, we can't spend a year going and researching some rarefied gay person who lives in Scotland, we need to have a few of them in the organisation so that you intuitively have a sense of what your customer wants. And so the view of Aviva and the board is that we did not have a diverse enough workforce right the way through from top to bottom, and that has actually prevented us from growing properly, as in coming up with propositions that customers want. So it's an opportunity cost argument, I would say, that I have been using, and of course with my marketing background, not surprising that that's what excites me, because I think there's a huge marketing job to be done within Aviva to persuade people that we're taking this seriously, and then outside as a brand for our customers to know and get comfort from the fact that we really, really mean it. And so when we say we get our customers and we are insightful, and you need not fear what we're doing with your data, because we would understand your fears, that would have some credibility.
Fantastic. Helen, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would probably speak from an FMCG perspective, probably. They're some of the biggest companies that we work with currently, so we just held an empowerment conference for 120 women in Dubai. The sponsors of that were mostly FMCG companies. And the reason for that, I guess, is because these companies are not into philanthropy. You know, they're not doing this for the fun of it. They have these policies, and they mark themselves out specifically in the Middle East as having these policies because gender diversity in the workforce works. It makes good business sense to have women in your workforce. And I think specifically for FMCGs, as many people know, 90% of the purchase decisions in a household are made by women. Certainly, you know, in my household, probably in your households too. So for them, you know, not having women at senior levels and at board levels really means that there's a huge disconnect between what they're producing and what people are wanting or what people are buying. Also from a marketing and advertising perspective, the same is true. The drop-off in women as you go up, specifically in creative industries, is huge, which means that the adverts that are being created, which should be marketed to women, because they're the ones that are buying the products, are being created by men. And that just doesn't make any sense at all. So I think for us, you know, that's the big kind of gap that needs filling, and you know, the numbers just aren't quite adding up there.
Debarsha, I'm just going to change the conversation a little bit, and it was referred to in the previous panel actually with Kim and Wenda talking about how, you know, in these days one tweet can destroy a company. So in a world where sort of social commentary and media backlashes can come fast and furious, why should and how should brands show that they're inclusive? Because if we're honest, some companies will feel a certain fear factor. What do you think?
Well, I think first and foremost, this whole fear of getting it wrong shouldn't deter people from taking action in the first place. But having said that, I think there are a couple of very quick and easy wins if a company really wants to demonstrate to their audiences as to how inclusive they are in their thinking. And I know I was having a discussion with Jan just prior. One of the things that probably all insurers in the UK should be aware of, because it was a huge PR story that said the amount of the burglars, Asians are more likely to be prone to burglary than any other ethnic group, because Asians buy more gold and have more money at home. So for any burglar to break in to an Asian home, he's guaranteed success, let's put it that way. So if you're an insurer, I think that's a fascinating piece of insight. So what you try and do is devise some piece of comms that actually addresses that. And in all fairness, it's completely virgin territory. I know Kim is here from Visa. That's another prime example. So Visa does so much stuff in India, especially when they had Sachin Tendulkar, who was their brand endorser, or celebrity. It's a no-brainer for Visa to connect with the 40 million Indians living outside of India through a Sachin ad that would work well in US, UK, Australia, Canada, wherever the Indian diaspora is based, because that will help get a better clutter. Now, these kind of things are not happening at the board level, which is what, along with my role, I also advise boards of companies on how you can be more diverse in their thinking, because I don't think the boards of companies forget gender for a second. In terms of ethnicity, there isn't anybody from a black minority ethnic background saying that, hold on a second, I think we are missing a plot here. And one more thing, there is a slide that I just want to share, if that can come across. So technically, my objective is to help clients celebrate Christmas all year round so their cash registered sing jingle bells. And in all fairness, I've had a couple of clients saying that, oh, wow, why do you say that? I'm like, Christmas doesn't have to be necessarily your make or break season, because technically, if you're smart in targeting various ethnic groups, you can celebrate Christmas all year round. So Chinese New Year, Jewish Passover, Ramadan, Eid, Ganesh Chaturthi, they are innumerable festivals where people from different ethnic backgrounds go out and buy products. So this is a sheer example of how you can break through that clutter and go into a virgin market territory. So yeah, you can take the slide off now. Thank you, I guess.
That's interesting, because what you've just displayed there is a sort of frustration about trying to get people to understand the stories behind it. Jan, what do you find the hardest and most frustrating thing about your role? And you know, you've got an opportunity to make all these people in the room feel that emotion. So.
Yes, I'm rather renowned for my foul language, I think, and anger. I'll try not to do that. I'm being more composed today. I think I've been in my job only 4 months, this new job. What makes me angry is what made me angry last year. I hate the con of the idea of meritocracy, this idea that all of us can leave our real selves outside the door and trust that our work will speak for itself. And I don't think that's just a gender issue. I think that's an everyone issue. I think men suffer from it as much as anyone else. So that makes me angry. What's frustrating is the pace, because I know there's a lot of eagerness at Aviva to move on with this agenda, and people keep asking me for the silver bullet and the one thing and the quick wins, and actually this is a huge task that's going to take many hundreds of actions over many years to get anywhere, because we're not going to start suddenly making a whole load of people redundant and recruiting, because that's just fulfilling a diversity agenda, and the inclusion agenda is what I'm interested in, which is why I call myself the inclusion director, because if we have a strategy around inclusiveness, I think the diversity will come. The thing that most upset me in the last 24 hours, I've said before I'm the chair of Stonewall, and last night I was sent a link to an article. You may be aware that gay men are being rounded up in Chechnya and put in concentration camps, which is absolutely horrifying. And I saw an article last night saying that families were being given beaten up young men and being invited to either kill them themselves or they would do it for them. And I think it reminded me that I, as a lesbian, am illegal to be who I am in 70 countries in the world, and in 10, it's a capital offence for me to be who I am. And that's what makes me angry again, because over the top of this, there is a whirlwind of hate at the moment around difference. And I think we've all got to start celebrating the unique wonderfulness of each of us. Every one of us has something to offer to the world, which is good and which should be harnessed and which allows us to fulfill our potential. And the waste of not doing that actually ultimately makes me very angry.
Hear, hear. Different is not worse is one of my mantras. Helen, what is it that makes your fists clench with fury? And like, if only they'd get it, if only they'd understand.
I think the fact that, you know, and I speak specifically about women's issues here because, unfortunately, I live in one of the countries where you are not allowed to be who you are. So we concentrate on what we can do. And I think with women specifically, it's seen still as very much a women's issue. This is not a women's issue. This is a global issue. This is an issue that affects everybody. If as many women were working as men, 5% GDP would be added to the US, would be added to the UAE, and I think many other regions in the world. But the actual issue here is not just one of getting women back into the workforce, it's about flexibility for everybody. So it's flexibility for men as well. If you look at stats in Sweden, they have an amazing maternity policy where it's 18 months, and somebody, if anyone from Sweden is here, and I'm a little bit wrong there, please correct me, but I think it's 18 months, and you're allowed to share that between husband and wife. The resulting stat off the back of that is that it has the highest returnship of women with children, so 80% of women who have children are in the workforce. So this is an issue of men and women, it's an issue of shared responsibility, it's an issue of pushing the agenda for everybody, so that we could all have an equal footing and all do what we want to do. Simple as that.
One more question from me, and then I'm going to open it up to the floor.
Could I add to that, Sam? Because there is one thing which I
Very
just want
quickly.
Very quickly. Two things. One is, oh, sorry, there is no ethnic brief. I'm like, dude, there's a better chance of me being the prime minister of the country than getting an ethnic brief. So that's never going to happen. So you've got to be proactive. And secondly, coming from an ethnic background, I do lots more other things than just do money transfer and buy 10 kg rice, right? So I've got a house, I've got a car, I've got a 1-year-old, I buy nappies for, so those are the kind of things. So
No,
I have my
that's
side.
fine.
Thank you.
That's fine. So, if I was going to wave a magic wand, very, very short answers to this, please. What's the one thing that everyone in this room, whether they're an agency, a media owner, a tech company, whatever, what is the one thing that they would go back and do today as a result of hearing this panel here today? Jan?
Well, I've already signalled I don't like the one thing, because there's 100. But if you insist, and given that I'm looking at a group of people who love data, love analysis, look for insight, I would recommend that all of you actually go and take the trouble to ask your staff to declare who they are to you. The very act of doing that is an enormous signal, and I think you may be surprised to find how many of them are not prepared to tell you, and they don't trust you. So I think you would find that an informative exercise, and make sure you have a prefer not to say box, and you may be surprised.
Helen?
For me, it would be a very simple thing of whether you're using recruiters or whether you're going through your HR department, please take names, ethnicity, age, anything like that off a CV. We've spoken a lot about unconscious bias this morning. It's a real thing, and it affects people's lives. So please just take that off the CV before it comes to the decision maker.
Dee.
Yeah, one of the things to take on from Jan's point of view, I would urge and request and plead with people to just do an internal audit of their media campaigns or their media plans or whatever, and figure out whether they are working as effectively as they should, and whether the message is reaching out to the entire population of the country, wherever that you're based in or not. Because unless you do that, that's not going to happen.
Great answers, guys. Right, okay, to the floor. Can we have the mics out and put your hands up with questions, please? There's one lady over here. The mic could not have been further from you.
I'm Mary speaking. I work for Prince Lexicon, but I'm mainly a Brexit baby, meaning I'm an European immigrant in London now. Question to Debashi, do you think there's any role for what you do in also writing a more positive story about migration overall for society? Because the two are definitely connected when it comes to gender politics and LGBT. Do you think there's much a better role for companies there as well?
Absolutely. I think there needs to be a positive story being driven about all the migrants. One of the things I said, I still remember, it was a Chanel pitch whilst at Omnicom, and one of the things that I said at the board, at that meeting was, if you take a look at the Sunday Times rich list, can you tell me how many people from a white British background get featured in the top 10? 1, Duke of Westminster, right? The balance 9 all come from an overseas background, from an ethnic background, who have made jobs, who have created jobs, who have made industries, and who also are driving force on FTSE 100 with regards to their companies being set up. Another piece of stats, 25% of the tech startups in Silicon Valley come from people who are Indian, right? It's 25% of tech startups, and we are talking big things here. But yeah, I completely agree with you. I think media as a wider entity needs to play a more positive role in portraying that, which unfortunately they don't.
Could I just add a comment to that? Because I was very heartened when I presented my strategy to the group exec in February that our group chief executive specifically said that he wanted to support my agenda because of the role of Aviva in the world in the current context. And actually it is Stonewall's view that big global companies and commerce are going to have more impact on politics and culture and tolerance than anyone else, because they're in the room talking to the people that need to be talked to, and they care about both their staff and their well-being, and they want the best talent, and they care about their customers. And so that double whammy of commercial interest probably will be more effective than anything else.
Yeah, I think there's a huge responsibility. You know, at the end of the day, people in this room put things on screens of Britain or in newspapers of Britain. What does that mean? You know, we have a responsibility to actually speak to real Britain today, and that's something which brands can take up and on. Other questions?
I must say, I did admire the Heineken ad I saw just recently, and absolutely, I know Pepsi got into trouble, so I won't make them feel any worse than they probably do, but I think for me there was something rather beautiful about that experiment and the role of the brand in it. And I'm so old, I remember Heineken being the beer that reached the parts other beers couldn't reach, and I felt there was almost a going back to that integrity about actually the power of a conversation over a beer to open people up to difference that might not otherwise happen. And that's the kind of integrity that we need to see in our brands. I was very concerned at Aviva that we didn't just start putting gay people in our ads to make me feel happy when I knew the customer experience wasn't going to stand up to it. And I think we've got to be patient enough to make the changes in our customer experience that are authentic to these diverse audiences we're trying to appeal to. So whilst the imagery is incredibly important, and I think certainly in the arena of content, certainly for people like Channel 4, for broadcasters, for any kind of publisher, I think you can go further. But for us, we needed to make sure that when we issued a pension statement to our customers, it didn't always illustrate a future pension of a husband and wife, when you bloody well knew that I had a civil partnership and it was a wife and a wife. So Aviva Pride worked really hard to persuade the company to do things like that before we started making, putting gay people in our ads, which I think can be rather cheap. I hate the whole pink pound thing. I hate the reductive nature of you ought to take notice of this group. Sorry, because I know that's one of the arguments that you make. I kind of get it on one level, but actually that isn't what we're talking about here. It's not open up the wallets of a group of people you've been ignoring. It's about the importance of being insightful about people as a whole for the benefit of all of us. That's the point.
And is it, I'm going to do a follow-up question to you, Jan, is there fear in the boardroom when you actually are looking to be more inclusive in your comms? I mean, what would Heineken have felt in their boardroom, Pepsi?
What I have found extraordinary is our board are more up for it for this than the rest of senior management, I think, if I'm honest. So my big internal marketing exercise is reaching the senior leadership teams, because it's not the board who run I know the board run the PLC, but within each of our countries we have a wholly owned subsidiary board, and it's actually getting to the senior management teams in every market. My ambition is that by the end of the year, I will get every chief executive in every one of our markets to make a statement of intent about what they intend to do on this agenda. Of course, the gender agenda is the one piece of data where everyone should be aiming ultimately for 50%. But on the other dimensions that one might measure or feel able to measure, of course it will vary according to the demographic of the country that you're in. So you've got to make sure they own the agenda, but when you sit in a room full of men, I can tell you I'm not the most popular person arriving, and I've had some pretty difficult conversations so far.
Fantastic. One more question from the room. Be brave. A man? Come on. Yes. You have the mic over here, please. It is a man.
I'll take that compliment, thanks, Sam.
So you should.
I'm not promising it's a good question, but,
We'll judge that.
we have this thing where we focus on something because it's a thing we need to address, but I think in my career, this concept of digital and having heads of digital, focusing on digital, and I guess in media, digital, and every time I've said the purpose of a head of digital is to make yourself redundant, because we should all be digital. So I know it's not pushing on the same level, but do you guys feel that when I guess we're successful?
When are we going to be done? When are we going to stop Sam coming back and sharing this bloody panel every year? Yeah?
Yeah, I mean, I think I can definitely answer that question. I had a meeting with the UN Global Compact the other day about the issue of gender diversity. So they have a specific thing within the UN Global Compact which is called WEPS, Women Empowerment Principles, and we were kind of discussing back and forth, and I said, honestly, the day that I don't have to turn up to work and open the doors of Hopscotch is the day that I've done my job effectively. So I am kind of doing myself out of a job by doing my job. So yeah, you know, it is that kind of end goal, but I think there's always going to be, are we ever going to get there? Probably not in my lifetime. So, you know, I'm fairly confident about that, but I think that is the end goal, yeah.
I feel the same about not in my lifetime, and I'm very struck. I was struck yesterday, the presentation from the chap, I can't remember his name, from IBM, who said, don't worry about the fact that the machines will mean everyone has exactly the same insights, because our biases will kick in. And I think we have to accept the profound nature of bias in the human brain. And I think this is a topic that we are going to always have to work at. So I think the big five, as I call them, of sexuality, age, gender, disability, and race and ethnicity, maybe our life's work will be done, because that will be more evident. But there will be all sorts of cognitive skills, other biases that we have. I just think the human instinct to connect with those who are like us is really, really profound. And I know that a lifetime in marketing, I managed to make the board laugh, because I said, I've known this all my career. We just didn't call it unconscious bias. We called it brand loyalty. We all knew that people didn't go into a supermarket re-examining every decision that they made. So we, in marketing, instinctively understand about unconscious bias. And yet we have been so poor at addressing this issue to our own benefit. And I think if you don't walk out of here thinking, if I take this seriously, my company will grow and I will be more successful in a digital age with all whatever that brings to it, I don't know what else to say, really, because that's why Aviva are doing it. We're doing it because we want to grow. We want to be a successful company. We happen to us, a side benefit of that is to bring our voice out and loud in the world, protecting people who are being discriminated against.
So it was a good question, I can categorically say that. And this was a fantastic panel. Thank you very, very much, guys.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.